By the year 326 BC, Alexander of Macedon had achieved absolute military dominance. He had marched his armies eastward and completely crushed the mighty Persian Empire, reducing its administrative centers to ruins. This string of victories bred intense confidence in the ranks. The Greek forces no longer viewed their commander as a brilliant general. They believed him to be the literal, divine son of the god Zeus. Standard Western narratives often suggest Alexander stopped his conquest here because his men were simply homesick. In this version of the story, the greatest army in antiquity chose to walk away for the sake of morale. The historical record documented in both Greek and Indian texts tells a different story. The invasion of the Indian subcontinent culminated in mutiny, psychological terror, and a violent encounter that nearly cost the conqueror his life. Alexander was forced out. A sophisticated, multi-layered wall of societal resistance blocked his advance and finally broke the momentum of the Greek expansion. The first major choke point occurred at the banks of the Vitasta River, known to the Greeks as the Hydaspes. Here, King Porus anchored his forces to confront the invasion. The resulting clash was brutal. Torrential rains turned the battlefield into a swamp, neutralizing the famous Greek cavalry. This allowed King Porus to deploy his heavy war elephants, which inflicted massive casualties on the invading ranks. Alexander managed to outmaneuver Porus and secure a tactical victory, but the human cost was staggering. The volume of Greek dead and wounded proved that pushing deeper into the subcontinent would destroy his army through pure attrition. Alexander's decision to return Porus's kingdom served a cold strategic purpose. He needed a local king to secure his flank, knowing a Greek governor would face immediate, bloody revolt from the local population. This initial layer of defense established a clear military friction. Subjugating Indian kingdoms one by one would require a volume of blood and resources that the Greek Empire could not sustain. Seeking to assert his authority over this newly occupied territory, Alexander sent scouts into the local forests to summon the deeply revered Indian ascetics and philosophers to his court. One prominent ascetic, a man the Greeks called Dandamus, flatly rejected the summons. When an armed envoy arrived and threatened him with execution, Dandamus laughed. The ascetic explained that his physical body was tied to the earth, but his soul was immortal. If the Greeks chopped off his head, he would return to the soil. Alexander's gold meant nothing to a man with no possessions, and his weapons were useless against a man entirely unafraid of dying. This philosophical defiance stripped the conqueror of his psychological leverage. The Greeks realized that the threat of death had zero currency against the Indian worldview. The breaking point arrived when the weary Greek army reached the banks of the Vias River. Alexander stood before his forces and announced his plan to cross and march into the powerful Magadha Empire. On the opposite bank sat the Republic of the Youdheyas. They operated as a democratic society, but foreign historians recognize them as a nation in arms. Crossing that river meant engaging an entire population. Every citizen, male and female, was trained for total war, effectively turning the whole territory into a combat zone. Realizing they were about to walk into a hyper-militarized society, the Greek morale collapsed. The rank and file mutinied, and for the first time, Alexander's soldiers flatly refused a direct order to advance. Alexander flew into a rage. He retreated into his tent and refused to speak to anyone for 3 consecutive days. Ultimately, he was forced to concede and order a retreat. The Youdheyas never had to fight a pitched battle to win. Their decentralized societal militarization provided a systemic deterrence that defeated the invading army through psychological pressure. To maintain appearances, Alexander ordered a fleet of warships built and began a naval retreat down the Indus River, proclaiming to his men that they would return later. 2 prominent republics along the river, the Mallavas and the Shudrakas, recognized the threat. These former rivals merged their armies and intermarried 1,000 of their citizens to forge a single unified society for the coming fight. This new alliance launched intense siege warfare. As the Greek navy moved downriver, they were repeatedly struck by coordinated attacks from the shore. During one siege, an enraged Alexander personally scaled an enemy wall and jumped into the stronghold completely alone. In the chaos, an Indian warrior drew an envenomed arrow and fired. The shaft pierced Alexander's armor and drove deep into his chest, dropping him into a pool of his own blood. The Greeks managed to carry their bleeding commander back to camp, but the retreat shifted from a strategic move to a desperate, bloody fight for survival. The aura of the unstoppable conqueror had vanished. Alexander survived the wound, but the news of his near-death experience rippled through the Greek territories. His aura of divine invincibility was shattered. Standard historical models often focus on the actions of individual conquerors. Ancient India defies this model. The Greek advance was halted by 3 pillars of resistance. King Porus engineered military attrition, the ascetics weaponized fearlessness, and democratic republics mobilized unified citizen armies. This was a highly organized civilization operating with complex power structures. They met the greatest military force of antiquity head-on and reminded Alexander of Macedon that he was, in the end, just a mortal man.